This is Scott Becker with the Becker Private Equity Podcast. Thrilled today to visit with a doctor, a dentist, Dr. Eric Recker, who's both an author of a book called That Damn Analogy. He speaks regularly on burnout issues. He's a keynote speaker. He's a brilliant dentist and also runs seminars. Dr. Recker, can you take a moment and tell us more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. My name, like Scott said, Eric Recker. I'm a practicing dentist. I see patients 3 days a week in my dental clinic, and I also am an author, speaker, workshop facilitator, and I mostly speak on the concepts of burnout, overcoming burnout because of my burnout journey. I have a new book coming out called That Damn Analogy, and what it's all about is how we are like a dam. And basically what we do is we control the flow of energy through us. So we get to regulate, just like a dam regulates water going through it, we regulate the flow of energy through us. As it turns out, we're really good at the outflow part, but we're pretty terrible at the inflow part. So my goal is to help people on that side of the equation so they don't get to the point where I was when I was burned out.
And talk a little bit about, one, I want to ask you about Pella windows, but I'll hold off on that for a second. But tell us about the inflow. How do we have some impact on the inflow so we stay centered, motivated, thriving, versus exhausting and sprawling and all over the place? How do we work on that inflow?
Yeah, so I found out that the equation for me that really stuck out when I was burned out, I tried to crack the code for a long time, was that I was overcommitted and I wasn't taking care of myself. So in the midst of that, I had to figure out, how do I do this? So recovery and how we take care of ourselves and inflow is something we have to be thinking about all the time. Because I think what we do is we have 2 extra minutes or even 30 seconds in between things, and we're right onto our phones, right onto our digital devices, which sometimes we need to do that, but really what that ends up doing is draining us even more, makes us more anxious, makes us more stressed out. We're worried about the things we get, the notifications we get. We're worried about missing out, when really our brains need some quiet space. So a lot of what I talk about is just kind of going back to the basics, finding time to be quiet, to be outside, finding times away from our screens, times to recharge. And sometimes we don't have time to recharge on that 2-week vacation on the beach. If that doesn't happen, how can we scale that back to the amount of time we have? So if it's not a week, maybe we only have a weekend. Where can we go to kind of recharge then? Maybe we only have a day or a half day. We might have an hour. We might only have 5 minutes. And what can we do in that 5 minutes to actually help right the ship? We could get on our phone and scroll around on social media for a little while, or we could sit and just breathe for a few minutes. Those are the kind of things that when we can get those figured out, then our life starts to flow a little better.
And talk a little bit about, I mean, literally I had the experience that Chanel could vouch for this. I had to go meet a colleague for coffee. I left my phone in the car, and then I missed the last podcast with a regular guest, so I feel bad about that, but Chanel interviewed him, so it went okay. But, we're so used to having our phones with us for everything. I mean, I hardly ever do that, but I did. And of course, I felt better at coffee with my colleague, because I wasn't looking at my phone and I was talking to him and we were engaging. But of course, I did miss the call I had at 1 o'clock a half hour ago. But how do we build in some of those habits, and what works for you in terms of managing that inflow? Because I'm as guilty as anybody. Like, the second I get free, I'll look at my phone, I'll read a book on tape, I'll listen to a book on tape, I'll get my steps in. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of that chance to just breathe and relax. How do you discipline oneself to do so? Because it really seems like it takes discipline.
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I've started asking myself when I'm going to pick up my phone is, why am I picking this up? So I just tried to set a boundary on it. And if I don't have a good reason for why I'm picking my phone up, then I try to not pick it up. Obviously that we need our phones. We need to communicate, all of those kind of things. But we have turned our phones, which were a communication device and information device, we simply reduced them to being a digital pacifier. And so what happens when a little kid is kind of grumpy, we stick a pacifier in their mouth. And when we get a little uneasy with the quiet or sitting in our emotions or whatever you call it, we go right to that phone. And all it is a pacifier for us. We get a little bit of dopamine release. That helps us feel better for a little bit. Meanwhile, we forget our problems, and those problems continue to build up steam, roll down the hill, and all of a sudden they're a big boulder that runs us over.
Talk for a moment. You do a few different things. I know you do some coaching of other professionals. You also do some keynote speaking. You're also an author. You've got a dental practice. What are you enjoying the most today, and how do you keep it all straight? And if you had a choice between the different things, what would you do more of?
I enjoy all of the things I do. The way that I can do all the things I do is I sold half of my practice to a partner. So now I have a partner in the office, and that helps me to have a little bit more time, a little bit more bandwidth to be able to do some of my other favorite things that I do. It's one of those things that when you have a message inside you that you feel like needs to get out, and it is so powerful that you know you're going to regret it on your deathbed someday if you don't do it, then you just find a way to do it. So I see patients in my office 3 days a week, and the other 2, sometimes 4 days a week, because it always ends up being more than I think it's going to be. I do the other things that I put under the umbrella of content. What I'm most excited about is 2 things. One is doing workshops on my book, The Dam Analogy, where we go in and we just really work with the team on living present in their own life, on identifying where they're at and how they need to refill, identifying some gaps in their plan, and helping to build a plan for individuals so they can move forward and maybe push that burnout back a little bit, or even if they're not feeling burnout, just to live a life of being more present. So that's one of the things I'm super excited about. The other one is I hosted my first Win the Now gathering in Park City, Utah. So I took a group of business owners out there, and we spent 2.5 days doing some experiential learning, talking about becoming our best version, leveling up, expanded on some of the dam analogy concepts. We took private curling lessons. We did a sleigh ride up the ski slope to dinner. We just packaged this all together, and at the end, we came up with a plan for everyone, a plan of 3 steps that everybody had come up with for themselves to move forward, and accountability for how to move forward on those plans. And I've had follow-up with each of those people so far, and it's really cool to see the life change. So that was the first one. I'm hoping it will be the first of many. It's one of being able to take a group out and really get to know them and pour into them and help them through this process is one of the greatest joys of my life.
And talk about, did you also get a chance to ski in Park City? And talk a little bit about the workshop. Did you love running that, moderating it, helping people? Talk a little bit about that. And where did you stay in Park City? One of my favorite places in the world.
Yeah. So my wife and I actually bought a place in Park City a few years ago. We loved it so much out there. We had been there 6 or 7 times, and we just decided to get a place out there. So we absolutely love it out there. We've been out there a lot of times, all over the place. I skied actually before and after the workshop. This was a group that had a fairly tight time schedule. So they came in the morning of, and then we started that afternoon and went the rest of that day and the next 2 days. So basically what we did, we started off with kind of a snapshot of where everybody was at, looked at some of the mountains in their life that they were facing. And we did this, their group rented a nice VRBO, Airbnb. So we were there able to do it on site. So we were able to do this. Everyone was sitting on couches. We were in front of a fireplace. It was just a really cool, relaxed atmosphere for learning. So we started off with that. We did actually took some time to be quiet during the time that we were there over the couple days. We took some time for journaling and reflection. I would have a segment of teaching that I would do, And then we would have some quiet and some journaling, and we'd come back and process through everything as a group. We talked about living in the present moment, some strategies for that. We talked a lot about the things that drain us. We went through a paradigm for how to look at all the commitments in our lives, how we can look at each one of those objectively, and how we can decide which of those things are worthy of our time and which of those things we need to discard. And then the curling fits in really cool with that. We were on the Olympic ice and learned how to do curling as a group. And it was just amazing how that ties in with everything that we were working with on the weekend. We came back from that, had one final session where everybody had some time to brainstorm their plans with all that they had learned over the last day and almost 2 days. And then they came up with 3 things that they were going to do moving forward. And then the group got to play consultant for each of those people. And we tweaked the plans, solidified the plans, and helped figure out how accountability was going to work going forward with the plans. So it was just one of those times where I think a group can come together with someone else who's facilitating it and just leave feeling refreshed, but also empowered and ready to go for the next phase of life.
Well, Dr. Recker, what a pleasure to visit with you. Just tell people where they can learn more about you, where they can hire you as a keynote speaker, where they can find your book. Give us a little bit of how do people find you and engage with you?
Yeah, home base for me is, it's real easy. It's just my name, ericrecker.com. Most of the information you need is on there. Links to my social media. There's my book actually comes out April 12th. So all the links will be on there for that. I have a blog on there. Couple of fun free resources. There's 5 principles of win the now. If you're struggling to live in the present moment, you feel like you're not in the same place, mind and body, you can grab that for free on there. And I also have a 5-day knockback burnout challenge. It's a great way if you feel like you're a little bit torched at work, maybe a lot torched. This is a good way to raise your hand confidentially and say, I might need some help with that. So you can download that there as well.
Well, Dr. Recker, I want to thank you for joining us on this podcast. Thank you very much. A pleasure to visit with you, and good luck on the slopes. Hopefully you get another month or so of good skiing out there.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you, Scott.